Daenerys Targaryen's ragtag coalition of sellswords, unsullied, and dragons will soon face an insane alliance of slave armies and mercenaries in the Winds of Winter. We've explored the snowy Battle of Ice and the muddy Battle of Steel, so now let's dive into the flames of the Battle of Fire. For more content like this, feel free to like and subscribe. First, we must journey back to the Targaryen campaign across Slaver's Bay, a wealthy nexus of the slave trade, boasting 3 cities: Astapor, the Red City, Yunkai, the Yellow City, and Meereen, the largest of the 3. In A Storm of Swords, Daenerys forgoes returning to Pentos to instead sail to Astapor and purchase its infamous Unsullied army. Using her ships and dragons as payment, she betrays the deal, unleashing Drogon on the plaza and commanding her new army to sack the city, slay the masters, and free the slaves. Her ranks are bolstered by grateful freedmen. Before she leaves, she installs a ruling council, a healer, a scholar, and a priest. The next city, Yunkai, is ruled by the Wise Masters, who focus on breeding and raising bed slaves. They are prepared for her arrival, swelling the ranks of their slave soldiers with the sellsword companies, the Stormcrows, and the Second Sons. One night, Daenerys orders a surprise attack on the enemy. Grey Worm and the Unsullied will assault one flank, Ser Jorah Mormont and his men will assault the other, and the Dothraki will charge through the centre. Daario Naharis switches the Stormcrows to Dany's cause, and attacks the Yunkish army in the rear. They quickly surrender. The Wise Masters, not wanting to be sacked like their Astapori cousins, concede to Dany's demands. They will free all their slaves in return for maintaining control of the city. Finally, the swollen Targaryen army marches to Meereen. The Great Masters wisely hide behind the great walls of their city, knowing they can outlast a siege. Dany cunningly dispatches a group to infiltrate Meereen through the sewers and free slaves from the fighting pits. They rise up in rebellion, and during the chaos, the Targaryen army breaks down one of the gates. After learning of what befell the cities she left behind, she decides to stay and rule. It's one thing to conquer, it's quite another to lead. Despite her altruistic intentions, Dany did not leave lands of milk and honey in her wake. Slavery is built into the very culture and economy of these cities, and they will not transform overnight. In Astapor, a former slave butcher named Cleon rises up in rebellion and executes the council, claiming they wanted to return the good masters to power. The butcher declares himself King Cleon the Great and orders all highborn boys to be trained as the new Unsullied. Now the slaves are the masters, and the masters are the slaves. The Wise Masters of Yunkai, meanwhile, break their word. They reinstate their barbaric customs, send envoys to fellow slave cities, and hire sellsword companies for support. An anti-Daenerys alliance begins to form, led by Yerkaz Zoyunzak, the richest man in the Yellow City. Their first target is not Meereen, however, but Astapor. Cleon sends his envoy, Lord Gale, to persuade Daenerys to militarily and matrimonially join with Cleon. She refuses. The Butcher King and his young Unsullied are smashed by the Yunkish host at the Battle of the Horns of Hazat, and they flee back to the Red City. When the Yunkai reach their walls, the king demands his army march out once more to fight. He is swiftly slain and replaced by Cleon II, who rules for 8 days before being murdered himself by the new monarch. Cleon I's concubine, however, also takes the crown. King Cutthroat and Queen Whore rule over the starving chaos of the besieged city as their supporters fight in the streets. Some Astapori panic and strap Cleon the Great's corpse onto a horse, sending him out to lead the Unsullied once more into battle. His carcass and army are cut down. The gates are opened by a mob and the Yunkish forces stream in. Queen Whore dies in the fighting, King Cutthroat is torn apart by dogs in a pit, and a fire spreads throughout the city as its denizens flee, sick with the pale mare plague. The Alliance sets its eyes on Meereen. The city of Meereen is far from stable. Queen Daenerys Targaryen rules with her council, including her Kingsguard Barristan Selmy, the Seneschal Resnak Mo Resnak, and the Shavepate Skarhaz Mo Kandak. The city is rife with factions. The Unsullied and the Freedmen support Daenerys, as do the Shavepates, former Great Masters who have symbolically shaved their hair to embrace the new regime. Their leader is Skarhaz, who has also formed the Brazen Beasts, a city watch made of Meereenese natives. The Great Masters chafe against Dany's rule, while the Sons of the Harpy, shadowy guerrilla fighters who wish to overthrow the new queen and reinstate slavery, scurry in the shadows, murdering freedmen, Unsullied and Shavepates alike. The Slavers Alliance sends its navy to cut off the city's supply, including Carthene ships, which block the Skahazadhan River to the north of Meereen. The land army arrives afterwards, setting up hosts to the south, east and north of the city. They boast 6 massive trebuchets: Dragonbreaker, Harridan, Harpy's Daughter, Wicked Sister, Ghost of Astapor, and Mazdan's Fist. though the Wise Masters have no interest in storming the city. Like Astapor, they want to let it starve and collapse in on itself. Although this time around, it's the Yunkai who have brought the bloody flux with them, which spreads throughout their camps and within Meereen. The Breaker of Chains learns the art of compromise. A peace treaty is signed and a hostage swap is agreed. In return, Dany must marry Hizdahr zo Loraq and allow Yunkai and Astapor to continue slaving without interference. As a show of goodwill, she reluctantly reopens the fighting pits. This is when the fragile peace goes to shit. Dany rejects a bowl of poisoned locusts, which are instead gobbled up by strong Belwas, who gets sick. As if the attempted poisoning wasn't bad enough, Drogon arrives and burns the place, disintegrating Yirkaz zo Yunzak and therefore any chance of peace. Dany flees on Drogon's back and vanishes. King Hizdahr zo Loraq takes over the city, but is cooed by Barristan Selmy and the Shavepate. Barristan believes that Hizdahr was the attempted poisoner, which means in truth he almost definitely isn't. With Drogon missing, there are only 2 dragons left, Rhaegal and Viserion, who have been locked up by their mother. This brings us swiftly to Prince Quentyn Martell, who was sent on a quest to marry Daenerys by his father, to forge an alliance and overthrow the Lannisters. Dany refused him, but he didn't give up. He entered the pit, struck off the dragon's chains, and was engulfed in dragon flame. Rhaegal and Viserion fled into the night. Dany is missing, the dragons are free, and war is on the horizon. Let's break down the factions on both sides of the upcoming conflict, starting with the Targaryen loyalists in Meereen. With Hizdahr zo Loraq and Reznak mo Reznak locked up, Sir Barristan Selmy is the self-appointed Hand of the Queen and military commander of Dany's ragtag forces. He is an honourable, experienced knight of the Kingsguard, who you can learn more about in this video about the real Barristan. He has been training former pit fighters and other slaves in Westerosi swordsmanship and customs, including his squires Red Lamb, Larrick the Lash, and Tumco Low. Skarhaz Mokandak is an especially cruel Shavepate, a man who demands bloodshed against the masters of Meereen and the murder of noble child hostages. His brazen beasts wear brass animal masks. Skarhaz may be more of a schemer than Barristan realises. After all, he finds himself sharing immense power with the old knight, who is about to charge out into battle. Did Skarhaz poison the locusts? Did he manipulate Barristan into orchestrating a coup on his own behalf? Perhaps. Grey Worm is the commander of the Unsullied, who number around 8,000 highly trained eunuch fighters. Dany freed them after buying them, and those who remained with her do so out of loyalty. Speaking of loyalty, the freed men from Astapor, Yunkai and Meereen have joined Dany's ranks, forming their own free companies totaling around 8,000 men. Marcelin commands the Mother's Men, Simon Stripeback commands the Free Brothers, and Molono Yosdob commands the Stalwart Shields, until he dies of the Pale Mare and is replaced by Tal Torak. There are also the Psycho Pit Fighters, who are more loyal to Hizdahr than to Dany or Barry. Meanwhile, Dany's small but loyal crew of Dothraki have mostly left the city to search for their queen beyond the Skahazadhan. The elderly Romo stays behind with the remaining riders. And of course, there's the last remaining sellsword company to not switch over to the Yunkish army. The Storm Crows are captained by the flamboyant rogue Daario Naharis, who's currently a hostage of Yunkai as part of the Broken Peace Treaty. In his absence, the company is co-captained by his lieutenant the Widower and his archer commander Jockin. They number around 500 men, infantry and horse. Now moving on to the Slavers Alliance, led by Yunkai. They appear to boast the numerical advantage. First, we have to break down the Yunkish Wise Masters and their slave armies. With the fiery death of Yunzak, the supreme command is rotated daily among the masters. What could go wrong? The smartest and supposedly least cruel of the masters is Yazan zo Kagaz, the Yellow Whale, a disgustingly corpulent man dying of an unknown Sothorios disease. He owns a bell-tinkling grotesquerie of slaves, including a goat boy, a bearded woman, and his hermaphrodite lover named Sweets. Oh, and how can we forget his most recent purchases? A dwarf man, a dwarf woman, and a gruff warrior. That's right, it's Tyrion Lannister, his sidekick Penny, and Ser Jorah Mormont. The sickly Yellow Whale dies of the Pale Mare, and his slaves escape, including Tyrion's little trio. The remaining Wise Masters are an absurd assortment of weirdos. Melaza, the girl general, is a teenager who fancies herself Yunkai's answer to Daenerys Targaryen. She owns a force of young, buff, handsome slave soldiers with erotic shields. Paezar zo Myrak, the little pigeon, is a small, stunted man who breeds extremely tall slaves called herons, who he places on stilts. God, these people need to go to therapy, goddamn. The Clanker Lords, Cheshar, Maison, and Krasdan zo Raisin, chain all their slave soldiers to prevent them from fleeing. Genius. Gorzak zo Eraz is known as Pudding Face, Gazdor zo Alak is known as Lord Wobblecheeks, Morgaz zo Zerzan is known as the Drunken Conqueror, Phasar zo Phase is known as the Rabbit, and we don't know the true name of the remaining maesters, just their nicknames, the Charioteer, the Beastmaster, and the Perfumed Hero. Unsurprisingly, their dirty gold has bought them the hearts of sellswords. Captain Bloodbeard runs the Company of the Cat. It is he who suggests hurling pale mare corpses over the walls of Meereen to infect the city faster. The company boasts around 3,000 infantrymen. They crave plunder and harbour a fierce rivalry with the Windblown. The murmuring Gylo Rhaegon is the captain of the Long Lances, a company of 800 riders. Brown Ben Plum, who is somehow related to House Plum in the Westerlands, commands the Second Sons, who initially joined Dany's cause and helped her take Meereen, but they defected to Yunkai when she locked up her dragons. While escaping, Tyrion sneakily makes his way to Ben Plum's pavilion and tries to bribe him to turn his cloak once more, offering gold and a Westerosi lordship. After all, a Lannister always pays his debts. Ben Plum's right-hand man is Casporio the Cunning, an elegant Bravosi. Their company boasts around 500 men. Finally, there's the Tattered Prince, the captain of the Windblown. Tatters is a former Pentoshi prince who fled his responsibilities to become a sellsword. His patchwork cloak is made up of the torn surcoats of the men he has slain. His lieutenants are Cago Corpsekiller, the Dothraki who earned his new epithet by cutting down Cleon's carcass in battle, and Denzo Darn, the warrior bard. They boast 2,000 men, infantry and cavalry. Barristan Selmy sends 2 of Quentyn Martell's friends to the Tattered Prince, offering him the city of Pentos in exchange for his support. Other cities have come to Yunkai's aid. The slave city of New Geese has sent 6 Iron Legions, the most skilled forces in the Yunkish camp. 2 legions sit to the south of Meereen, 2 legions sit to its west, and 2 sit to the north beyond the Skahazadhan. New Gis has also sent 100 war elephants. As well as a navy, the city of Karth has sent their camel corps to help in the fighting. The city of Illyria, meanwhile, has sent around 300 crossbowmen, while the city of Tolos has sent its slingers, men who slingshot smooth metal balls. No, really. There are even reports that the Wise Masters are attempting to hire a Dothraki Khalasar. The nearest one, beyond the Skahazadhan, is Karl Jacko's 20,000 riders. Every battle, of course, demands its wildcards. As we know, the dragons Rhaegal and Viserion are free, resting upon Meereenese pyramids. But that's not all, because the Ironborn are coming. King Euron Greyjoy has sent his brother Victarion to bring the Iron Fleet to Meereen with Dragonbinder, to both blow the horn and bind it to Euron's will, and to court Dany in Euron's name, so that the Queen of Meereen and the King of the Iron Islands may marry and take the Iron Throne together. Victarion despises his brother, and wants both Dany and her dragons to himself. During his travels, he rescues an enigmatic red priest named Moqorro, who his Ironborn Reavers fearfully nickname the Black Flame. It is he who cures Victarion's hand by turning it into a smoking volcanic fist. Moqorro is the right-hand man of the High Priest Benero, who preaches that Daenerys is Azor Ahai reborn, and secretly sent Moqorro to meet her. 90 ships of the Iron Fleet sailed from the Iron Islands, and only 45 have made it to Slavers Bay. But Victarion successfully captured and commandeered 15 merchant vessels along the way. An Ironborn thug with a volcanic hand and a zealous fire worshipper by his side, it doesn't get any more metal than that. Behind the Iron Fleet is the Volantene Fleet, numbering between 300 and 500 ships. Volantis is another slave city, so they are likely sailing to help depose Daenerys. And finally, the wildcard of all wildcards. Marwyn the Mage, the Archmaester of the higher mysteries of the Citadel, is on his way to meet Daenerys as well. To summarise, the main Yunkish camp lies to the south of Meereen, consisting of the Wise Masters and their slave armies, sellsword companies of dubious loyalty, crossbowmen and slingers, 2 Giscari legions, and 6 giant trebuchets. To the east of the city lies 2 Giscari legions, and to the north of the Qartheen-blockaded Skahazadhan lies the final 2 Giscari legions. To the west of Meereen, Qartheen and Yunkish ships blockade the city. Within Meereen is a ragtag assortment of knights, freedmen, mercenaries, and 2 rogue dragons. A few sample chapters from the Winds of Winter have been revealed, some transcribed, some passed on through memory. Let's explore the opening stages of this battle based on what we know so far. In Barristan 1, we learn of his strategic plan. Barristan Selmy and his mounted army, his squires, Dothraki riders, and the Stormcrow cavalry will charge from the market gate towards the trebuchet Harridan, the blinding sun at their backs. Their goal is chaos. Destroy the trebuchet, slay the Wise Masters, burn the pavilions. The pit fighters will then emerge from the market gate on foot, and charge screaming to enter the breach, slay as many nobles and officers as they can, and retreat. This is all just a distraction to give the Unsullied time to march out of the city, form up, and march in formation towards the 2 trebuchets. To free up Unsullied for the field, the battlements and streets of Meereen will be mostly manned by the Shavepate's brazen beasts. Meanwhile, the Mother's men mass at the south gate, the Stalwart Shields mass at the eastern gate, and the Free Brothers mass at the north gate. In Barristan 2, the battle truly begins. The mounted men charge out of the city towards the Harridan. It's protected by an entire Giscari legion, so Barristan quickly diverts his men towards a weaker target, the absurd Herons and the Clanker slaves. The chained soldiers are cut down, the Herons are knocked over, and the little pigeon has his skull crushed by the Red Lamb. Meanwhile, the Unsullied successfully form up and march on to the two trebuchets. However, Barristan notices new ships arriving at the bay. Has Volantis finally arrived? The ships smash into the blockade, and Ironborn warriors leap onto the shores, charging into the sellswords. In Victarion 1, we learn of the Iron Captain's plan. He orders Wolf One Ear to utilize the captured merchant vessels as a Trojan fleet filled with the most hardened Ironborn reavers, who will hide below deck as they charge the blockade. Then they will emerge and board the blockade ships, while the Iron Fleet sails through the breach and lands. Victarion stays behind, preparing for his thralls to blow the Hellhorn. In Tyrion's chapter, we see firsthand the chaos within the southern Yunkish camp. Malazar the girl general continues to issue commands, refusing to relinquish her power to Puddingface. All the while, Rhaegal flies above the naval battle like a bird looking for prey. Puddingface commands the Second Sons to drive the Ironborn back into the sea, while the girl general demands that they defend the wicked sister trebuchet. According to her, Marcelin and the Mother's men have broken the long lances and toppled the ghost trebuchet. The Second Sons then learn that the Tattered Prince has slain Puddingface and joined the Targaryen faction. His replacement commander, Morgaz the Drunken Conqueror, demands that the Second Sons sweep behind the Unsullied and take them from the rear. The sellswords do not follow any of these orders. Instead, they switch sides, partly because of Tyrion's promise of land and gold, but also because they believe Dany has finally unleashed her dragons. Brown Ben Plum claims to his men that they have always been on Dany's side, and joining Yunkai was just a ruse, which is, of course, utter bullshit. According to these sample chapters, the tables have turned, but how will the battle climax in the Winds of Winter? There's a chance that the Targaryen forces suddenly lose despite the changing odds, leaving Meereen vulnerable, but it's more likely, with the arrival of the Ironborn and the defection of two sellsword companies, that the Yunkish southern front will collapse. Wise masters will be slain, slave soldiers will flee, if not actively rise up against their owners, and the Windblown may clash with their nemesis, the Company of the Cat. The dragons are the scariest wildcard. The Dragonbinder may bind Rhaegal to Victarion, who will ride it into battle, rescue Daenerys, marry her, and declare himself King Vic. Or, more likely, it will be bound to Euron Greyjoy and fly westward to find him. Or, if Euron secretly followed his brother to Slaver's Bay, he might ride it there and then. Or maybe the Horn will just send the dragon berserk, triggering it to bathe the battleground in dragonfire. Regardless of the specifics, glory awaits Victarion, according to Mokoro. For a Red Priest to speak of glory? Yeah, Vic is burning to death, isn't he? Assuming he doesn't go on to continue serving Dany, or to flee and serve Aegon VI, Barristan's fate will likely be tragic. He could be slain in battle or burned by a rogue dragon, but he does not fear such a glorious death. No, something far more pathetic likely awaits him. The pit fighters coming up behind his riders are loyal to Hisdar, who Barristan has just cooed. They may literally stab him in the back. Or perhaps Barristan will return to the city only to be betrayed by the Shavepate. The show may have been on the right track. Barristan may be cut down by brazen beasts, murdered by the schemer to whom he naively handed the keys to the kingdom. The Shavepate himself could orchestrate a huge purge, murdering the noble child hostages and political rivals. He once told Barristan he wants to kill Hisdar with his bare hands. Perhaps he will. Skarhaz Mokandak may secure himself as the de facto king of Meereen. If so, it won't last long. Daenerys will return to her triumphant army, possibly with a Dothraki Khalasar at her back. By the end of this battle, she would have conquered Yunkai and the Slavers' Alliance, and collected a menagerie of esoteric and villainous advisors. A poisonous dwarf, an ironborn admiral with a smoking fist, a zealous red priest, a mad maester, and several brutal sellsword captains. The Battle of Fire will be the beginning of the end of Dany's time in Slaver's Bay, for it will soon be time to return to Westeros and take the Iron Throne. This video was inspired by the essays of Brynden Beefish. We're going to be moving on to the upcoming Battle of Blood next. In the meantime, if you want more of me, I was in Glidus' Jeopardy video. That was pretty fun. Check out the Patreon and the merch, and click here to watch The Real Barristan. Special thanks to my patrons, in particular, Andre, Caden, Colshot, Devcole, Itchaboi, Elias, and Morphy. See ya.